The side Webberley is on is her fucking wallet, ultimately.
What? How young should you listen to a child who is saying, I would like to change my gender?
The time that you listen is the first time that they say it. In my experience, it's around about 4 or 5. But you're not a biologist, you're not a doctor. Again, for us to ask a non-medic, because we're not talking to true physicians. Again, she's not a medic. But again, we have a non-medic interpreting.
And you've made that point on many occasions.
But people that aren't doctors shouldn't have opinions and weigh in on like trans healthcare. But children should tell doctors how their healthcare should be provided.
Sorry, that's just anti-trans.
We're going to watch this Helen Webberley, Helen Joyce debate. Helen Webberley has been doing like a PR tour by the look of it for the launch of Gender GP in America. But she's been doing all these debates. She went on GB News. She's debated Helen Joyce, famous TERF transphobe Helen Joyce, as we'll see. I guess trying to pitch herself as this kind of defender of the trans people against the evil transphobes. I don't want it. You can keep it. I don't want this kind of representation. I think Helen Webberley is a ghoul. But anyway, we're going to see what happened here. So yeah, let's have a look.
Entering single-sex spaces. That story has led the news. This programme is a chance for both sides of the gender debate to put their case. And if you haven't already, you can make up your own minds. WhatsApp us on 0333 003 2353.
You can also like and subscribe.
Text us 87222. Start your message with the word Times and email us at studio@times.radio. Let's start the debate with this question. Establishing what we mean by sex and what we mean by gender. Helen Joyce.
This is a good idea. They conflate the fuck out of these things. The way that Helen Webberley, was talking to that GB News guy, the terms were used very interchangeably. Female is somehow a gender and a sex term. It seems designed to be confusing, so I don't know.
Sex is biology. It's the thing that allows for sexual reproduction. It's the thing that's existed on this planet for more than 1 billion years. In mammals, half the mammals are male, half the mammals are female, and we're mammals. So half of us are men, half of us are women. That can't change. Mammals can't change sex. Some other animals can. Gender is an ambiguous word. Some people use it as a polite synonym for sex. Some people mean the stereotypes that people perform. Some people mean an inner feeling that's hard to define. So I tend not to use that word because it's too ambiguous.
What about you, Helen Webberley? What do you mean or establish by the word sex and gender?
Well, everyone says that sex is biology, and Helen here has just said that it's about reproduction. But there's,
ultimately it is about reproduction.
Chromosomes, the sexual function, the reproductive system. It's very various in humans, and to say that
it's really not that various. And even though there is a lot of microscopic variety in how you develop towards either producing the large or small gametes, ultimately, there are 2 gametes. There is one way of reproducing. And what we do as humans is we take complicated shit, like your sexual development, and generally kind of categorize it in 2, because there's 2 roles, there's 2 gametes. And that's perfectly fine to do. So really, you can't really say that sex isn't binary, because the binary model is just a way of categorizing it. And it makes a lot of sense because it accounts for the vast majority of people. I'm happy to take a better model for sex than binary, but I've never seen one.
Just one or the other is incorrect. There aren't just...
It's not that it's incorrect. You think that there's a better way of categorizing it. So let's see it.
2 ways that a body can be made. But whereas gender... There aren't just 2 ways that a body can be made.
Not really what the binary sex is saying. It's not saying you are necessarily XY, male, balls, penis, all that kind of shit. It's ultimately saying that if you reproduce, you will fulfill the impregnator role, not the impregnatee role.
But whereas gender is a deep personal identity of somebody, of how somebody lives their life, how they express themselves, how they see themselves. And that's, as we know, is completely unrelated to...
I don't like this definition. I mean, where's it derived from? You have to get those feelings around which sex or which gender you more align with. They have to come from somewhere. That comes from like society. That comes from like the social aspects of sex, which is what I tend to use to refer to gender. That comes from like stereotypes, that comes to what your preferences are versus what the stereotypes are, what the expected roles in society are for males and females, which again is where gender comes in. That's what I tend to refer to. So like to me, I think to a large extent, all this gender identity stuff, it's kind of like socially constructed and then like internalized. You certainly aren't born with a gender identity. A baby that's just come out of the womb is not able to have that kind of conception. So yeah, the idea that gender is like an innate, deeply held feeling of what you actually are, I reject it. I think it comes from the outside and I think it gets internalized. And it doesn't explain every trans experience. I don't really have a gender identity, I don't think. I'm like compelled to feminize. I know that I'm not female in any way, shape or form. I'm not going to try and justify being a trans woman by saying, well, on the inside, I'm a woman, because what does that even mean? Like there is no mechanism by which I can be female, and I'm okay with that. I just have certain preferences and I've transitioned. You can't tell me I'm not trans because I don't have a gender identity to match or not match with my sex when I have transitioned, when I live in many ways as a woman rather than as a man. Bear in mind, there's a very limited scope to where you can live as the other sex. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
To their chromosome pattern or their organs, their anatomy.
What do you say about that complete distinction that is being made there by Helen Webberley in terms of gender?
I mean, first, it's just not true. There are only two sexes. And the reason there are only two sexes is because there are only two gametes. And the gametes are the thing that define the sexes. This is established.
Yeah, so that's what her model is. So really what Webberley should be doing is showing why there's a better model that is more inclusive of more people. And like, I imagine she'll kind of set on this and be like, well, anyone that doesn't produce gametes doesn't have a sex then. You can expand the categories for sure.
In biology. But then this deep inner feeling, if sex is so nebulous, as Helen Webberley says, then how on earth is somebody meant to have this deep inner feeling? Like, what does it mean to feel like a boy or a girl if you don't even know what boy and girl mean? This just sounds like personality to me, or I don't know what it sounds like. It's just not defined.
Helen Webberley?
Yeah, personality, preferences, stuff like that. I'm generally going to be biased towards Helen Joyce's view, just from the off. That is just going to be the case. Not just because I dislike Helen Webberley. I do tend to agree with like gender criticals.
Well, it's like, what do you mean by personality? Okay, if it is personality, what's wrong with that? It's how somebody wishes to live their life. It's how somebody sees themselves,
so stereotypes.
How somebody fits into this world.
Stereotypes?
Well, why is personality a stereotype? I don't see it as a stereotype. And what do you mean by that?
But I mean, like, to call it something that's to do with being a boy or a girl, like, what? I mean, I just don't know what you mean. If a child comes out of the mother, you know, everyone says that's a little boy because that's the body of a little boy, and then at some point that child says that they have a girl gender identity. What does that child mean if girl doesn't mean anything? If girl just means people...
This is a good question. This is a lot better. Jesus Christ, it's a lot better than the GB News one. I have some hope for this, to be honest. I'm feeling a bit better.
So girl doesn't mean anything.
Well, you did, because you haven't given us a definition. It's just circular. You've just said it's a deep personal identity.
You said
that girls...
Maybe a bit aggressive. Maybe you'd want Webberley to kind of explain what a girl is then, rather than just kind of, well, you don't have a definition. But hey, listen, I understand. This person is very unlikable.
There are many sexes. Sex is varied. It could be chromosomes. It's nothing to do with your biology. You haven't given us something that somebody could talk about as a target for what it might mean to think that you are like a girl. You just had gone around in circles.
Well, goodness, I didn't think I'd had enough words to go around in circles, but there you go. I mean, you're...
Yeah, there is a bit of a problem that we've already put an awful lot on this person without just giving them a chance to explain first.
Comment was there are only two sexes,
yep.
and that's because there are only two gametes.
Yep.
I think to boil the whole of humanity down to gametes.
Not what they're doing. They're boiling down sex, not humanity. It's a very big difference.
For those who don't know what gamete is, it's basically an egg or a sperm. To say that the whole of humanity is to be dictated by whether your body produces...
It's not dictated. Your sex is dictated. Someone's sex is not the be-all and end-all of who they are.
Eggs or sperm is so mathematical, so binary, so basic. It's actually a basic misunderstanding of biology.
No boiling down, no reducing to. We just come in two types. You're a boy or you're a girl. Do anything you like. Do not let it hold you.
Yeah, she's boiling people down. She's boiling people's sexes down to gametes, not the people themselves.
You back. Go to the moon, be the president, anything you like, but you'll still be a boy or still be a girl.
But you've
That's all.
boiled it down to gametes. You're saying you either have ovaries or testicles, but there are many different variations.
There really aren't.
Are people who are...
Well, there aren't many different variations on gametes.
But you're not a biologist. You're not a doctor. How do you know you
Jesus Christ. Going to the appeal to authority.
sit there shaking your head saying there really aren't?
What are the variations, Helen Webberley?
Well, in terms of biology, which is, I think, Helen Joyce is trying to explain, we do have chromosomes, and there are many different patterns of chromosomes. That we do have reproductive organs, and there are different variations. Not everybody is born with XX and two ovaries, a womb.
Are you talking about
vagina.
intersex? People being born intersex?
Well, you can use that term. You can use. I mean, there's many different chromosomal patterns.
But what does this have to do with
anomalies,
gender
if you like.
identity anyway?
Well, no, because they're completely different. Exactly. You're grasping it.
Ah, Jesus Christ. I don't think this interjection was very good. She's explaining, like, let her do the thing, and then surely the rebuttal is like, yeah, Helen Webberley isn't a biologist either. She's like a GP or something. Like, let her explain. And then we need to get to, well, why do any of these variations not fit into male and female? When, say, someone with Klinefelter syndrome still very much resembles a male and might not even produce like gametes. But I mean, if we're talking about gametes, then you need to kind of focus on that like she is. Otherwise, you're kind of dodging the point. But Webberley is like super slippery. You see this all the time. It's always about dodging the point.
Gender identity anyway.
Well, no, because they're completely different. Exactly. You're grasping it.
So patronizing.
The biological sex is very different to gender identity, absolutely. And one is not dictated by the other.
There are two body plans, and there are sometimes anomalies, and they are very rare. But there are only two.
And anomalies that very much usually resemble one or the other. Like hermaphroditism. When you talk about like intersex, some people use, I think it's like 1.7% of people are intersex, but I'm pretty sure that includes all kinds of things like PCOS and Klinefelters, Turner syndrome, De La Chapelle's, all those kind of things, where someone is pretty clearly still one sex or the other. You know what I mean?
Two body plans.
Can I just put this question
Sure.
to you, Helen Webberley, about body?
And we didn't really get into like the gametes thing. It was a bit unsatisfying.
Is about biology. If we look at the proportion of trans women in terms of operations or surgery to remove their penises, what number are we talking about? What proportion, roughly, of trans women have had that kind of surgery?
Yeah, to me, listen, I think intersex should only be used for like people that exhibit like hermaphroditism or don't show any particular signs of being either sex. Like intersex should mean that it's not really very clear what your sex is, which is not the case for like how many Klinefelter patients, for example. How many of those are like misassigned female at birth? They're not, because they have penises.
I don't think we know that data, but when I last looked at that kind of data, I think around about 12% of people who reassign their...
Yeah, the other thing is, if you prioritize like self-identity and also play all this like fast and loose with what sex means and pretend that things like Klinefelters like are part of like disproving the binary because of the chromosome difference, that's going to be offensive to some people with Klinefelters who very much still identify as male because that's what they know themselves to be. Like, it's a bit bizarre.
sex choose to have genital surgery.
So it's low?
12%.
Yes, I mean, that is low. Would you agree?
Well, it depends what level you're comparing it with.
Well, I'm comparing it to anything that's above 12%, but it is a pretty low figure. Does that surprise you?
No. That's about what I thought it was too. Most trans women are just, completely standard physiological men.
Right. I mean,
To be completely fair, part of the reason there would be a low surgery rate is that in a lot of places there's waiting times, or you have to pay a lot of money for it.
taking that into account, Helen Webberley, do you think that a predatory man would ever use a transgender identity to get into a female?
Well, there are partial hermaphrodites. There's been 2 or 3 cases that I've seen throughout history where someone has been reported to be able to produce both gametes, but none of those have ever been proven. And if that does exist, it is 1 in billions chance. But there are human hermaphrodites.
Female-only space, like a hospital ward, a prison, or a changing room.
I think it's a very dangerous thing to associate transgender women with predatory men. So some men, whether they are trans women,
I would agree that it's not fair to do just in general, but really you're not doing that. You're associating trans women with males because they are male. And you're saying, well, with males, there is a higher chance that they will do this, that, and the other to females. Because when you look at sexual assault statistics, overwhelmingly it's male on female. And based on things the number of trans people, the proportion of trans women that are incarcerated for sexual assault, and how it's way more, is a higher percentage even than men, you kind of have to see it as a sex thing. And so in some circumstances, you should regard trans women as males, unfortunately. It just kind of is that way.
In identity, or whether they are male in identity. Some people, if you like, who have XY chromosomes, if we leave it there, will be predatory. But the difficulty is when we make that association.
Yeah, that is what the case, that is what the thing is.
That trans women automatically equals predator.
Well, I don't think anyone will say...
Yeah, no one's actually saying that trans women are automatically predators. They're just being lumped in with males who, in certain instances, women might feel uncomfortable around because of the higher risk that they'll be able to do something, the worse that they'll be able to do because they're male rather than female. Trans women are going to get lumped in that way because they're also male.
Say it automatically equals it, but at the same time, Helen Webberley has a point. It is a dangerous thing to link the two if we're talking about predatory men across the piece.
What's very dangerous is taking down the boundaries that keep male people out of spaces that female people need there to be no male people
in. But a predatory man might gain entry in some way or another.
And so do you leave your front door open when you go out just because a burglar might get in? Otherwise, we can't, nothing is foolproof. We have systems in order to safeguard. No safeguarding is perfect. We say no...
Yeah, really, you'd have to get rid of a lot of this safeguarding and just accept the higher chance of certain things like sexual assault, or it has to be done by sex. I don't think there's really another way around any of this, especially when it comes to rape shelters, domestic violence shelters, stuff like that. With toilets, you can play a bit more fast and loose, I guess. Especially busy places, public places where no one's going to have the opportunity to do anything.
Male people here knowing that some men may come in, but the rule is clear-cut. It's no men, it's no male people, and when we soften that boundary, we make it easier for bad people to come in. The people who use loopholes are precisely the worst people. So we have to be very clear, and that's no male people. The people who use loopholes are the worst people. If you have a loophole, bad people go through it.
Do you think there should...
Well, potentially. And there's always going to be loopholes. There's never going to be a perfect way of keeping men and women separated in some instances. There's always going to be the odd person that you can't really tell what sex they are. There's always going to be the odd, service owner or whatever that sees things differently.
Should be those protections then to reduce and minimise the risk that somebody might ever use or abuse. As you say, you don't want it equated with transgender or being a trans woman, that they should be minimised when it comes to sharing those spaces.
Well, I think what Helen said was that no male should enter a female space, and I think we've solved the argument because transgender women are female. They are female, and
biologically male, Helen Joyce would say.
She might say, but the Equality
Act...
And
many people would.
Well, if I might just go back to the Equality Act. The Equality Act protects two characteristics. It protects sex, and it also protects gender reassignment. And gender reassignment in the Equality Act is reassigning your sex. That's what the definition is.
But you have just said it's a very, well, I said it was a low figure, but you said it's only around 12% who have that sort of surgery.
Which doesn't change your sex anyway.
Excuse me. The surgery is unrelated to that. In the Equality
Sorry.
protects gender reassignment.
People would.
Because transgender women are female. They are female, and
biologically male, Helen Joyce would say.
She might say, but the Equality Act...
And many people would.
Well, if I might just go back to the Equality Act. The Equality Act protects two characteristics. It protects sex, and it also protects gender reassignment. And gender reassignment in the Equality Act is reassigning your sex. That's what the definition is.
But you have just said it's...
Well, that's for legal purposes. It's not like actually changing your sex. There's a reason why you might make trans a protected characteristic. But you shouldn't treat that as if like someone is therefore, for all intents and purposes, a woman when they're male or vice versa.
It's a very, well, I said it was a low figure, but you said it's only around 12% who have that sort of surgery.
Which doesn't change your sex anyway.
Excuse me. The surgery is unrelated to that. In the Equality Act, your gender reassignment, you don't have to have surgery.
Can I just ask you then, Helen Joyce, how comfortable are you that under the leaked guidance that we've had today, the Supreme Court was very clear that biological sex is the definition of a woman and a man. And for the purposes of the Equality Act, in that sense, we can talk about protected characteristics later on, but in terms of the Equality Act, the leaked document implies that there will be transgender people who have lived in their acquired gender, perhaps for decades. They could be confronted and questioned about their sex. That's undignified and intrusive, isn't it?
What's undignified and intrusive is coming into a space that is not for your sex, that is there for the other sex. Nobody should be trying to use a space that is not for their sex. Helen Webberley said that gender reassignment changes people's sex.
Yeah, this does depend on the space. In general, I agree. I think we do need to kind of talk about different kinds of spaces differently. Like I said, like bathrooms are a bit different to like rape shelters or women's prisons or whatever.
It doesn't do that in reality, and it doesn't do it in law. They're separate.
I think there are certain things that I think should be kind of questioned to like someone like Helen Joyce, such as what happens if like trans men start getting shit for using the women's, like women getting upset or confrontational or potentially even triggered because they just think that person is a male when they're not, that kind of thing. I think there is she's a bit too rigid, I think, with some of this stuff.
Separate characteristics. The Supreme Court was very clear on that. So a trans woman is a man for the purposes of the Equality Act and in reality, and we can all tell who the men and the women are by using our eyes and ears. It's how humanity has done it all.
Most of the time.
All along.
How can you tell? How can you always tell that somebody who, yes, maybe arrives at a communal changing room, maybe goes to the theatre and wants to use the loos, the lavatories that their gender have acquired, what is it that tells you immediately, I know what sex you are?
Are you ever puzzled when you look at the people around you, what sex they are? Because I'm not. And it's no one feature. We're very, very good at recognising sex. It's a ceiling attribute of humans that we can tell what sex people are. 99.99% accuracy, instantaneously.
Well, I clearly disagree with that. And I think, to boil down in 2025 in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, that we're actually going to let people's what they look like dictate which facility or service they're allowed to use by what they look like. I just don't. I can't believe that we would even think to go back to that.
If you saw a 6'2" man with a beard and he was speaking and you could hear his voice was very deep, and he went into the ladies' changing room after a 6-year-old girl, would you think there might be something wrong here?
Helen, you talk about the 6. Your arguments are always, it's got to be over 6 foot.
No, I'm
it's
just
got
asking
to be.
you, I'm giving you a specific example,
and I'm answering. And it's got to go in after a 6-year-old girl, and it's a man.
But yes or no?
I haven't finished. Can you let me finish? The thing is, we're talking. And you used to call him a man. Men don't go into the female spaces.
Sometimes
women
they do.
and transgender women are women, and they go into female spaces. And the fact that you portray this 6-foot man over 6 foot going in after a girl.
The thing is, though, like, can she not engage with the extreme case? Can she not engage with allowing all trans women point blank to go into any women's space means that you will get the 6'5" fucking hairy as fuck, whatever so-called trans woman in your space. Like, I do think it's worth having this person engage with it in the same way as I think that Helen Joyce should engage with the idea that some buck angel looking, muscular fucking trans man who might be of like a more male looking height might use the women's and might kind of cause an issue with some of her stuff. I think both of them could do with actually engaging with the more extreme example. And I'm going to guess that it's going to happen in neither case, which is annoying.
All the image you want to give is this man is so dangerous. I don't think that we in our society should be portraying men as automatically dangerous.
But what is your...
Well, it's not about that again. It's about the potential. Like, surely she must understand. She's a woman herself. Has she not met any women that have been, like, abused by men? And that really, if they see a man, it's going to make no difference what their identity is? Because if that man is not really trying very hard to look like a woman, but still insists on using women's spaces anyway, they're going to be seen as a man.
Answer to the specific. Just for argument's sake, if you saw that scenario, what would you be thinking, Helen Webberley?
If I saw a 6-foot man going into a female...
Well, don't worry too much about the height, but yes, a bloke, a big
Someone
man...
you can really tell is clearly male.
What would be going through your mind?
You're answering. If that is a transgender female, they have the right to go in whatever they look like. We can't be the looking police. We can't say, excuse me, you don't look female enough to go into my toilet. It's just an awful place to be.
I mean, where are trans women supposed to go, Helen Joyce?
Can I just point out that this means that anyone can go into the ladies, anyone can go into the gents, because we're literally not meant to be able to say to anybody, it's clear that you're not a man, it's clear that you're not a woman. So this is just an end to all sex-separated spaces. So, I mean, where are transgender women meant to go to the toilet? If they're not happy using the men's, which is where they should go because they are men, then hopefully there's a gender-neutral option for them. If there isn't, I'm afraid they're going to have to use the men's, because what is out of order is using the women's because they are not women, they are male.
What do you say to that, Helen Webberley?
The Equality... I was going to go back to real basics. The Equality Act protects people who reassign their sex. And you don't have to have had surgery, you don't have to take hormones, you reassign your sex. And people like Helen Joyce will always say, oh goodness, they're just going to go in and pretend. But there are over 262,000 transgender people in our country who need the security to go into spaces that align with their gender identity and try and.
Why do we need this? Why do trans people need to be able to use like female spaces if they're male? I don't need to use women's spaces. I don't use women's spaces anymore. I don't need to.
Frankly, for us to sit here and permit the language...
Like, she says a lot of stuff that is not really... She can't really, like, back up. She can't really justify. It's like rhetoric, you know?
...that says a transgender woman is a man is against the law because...
You hashtag just piss yourself. Listen, I guess it would be one way of protesting. Oh, you won't let me use the bathroom I want, so I'm going to piss myself in your establishment. Like, it's... novel, I guess.
And actually the Crown Prosecution Service would consider that as a hate crime. Transgender women are women.
But in terms of the Supreme Court ruling, it has said very clearly, for the purpose of the Equality Act, that sex is biological.
Yes. So remember we said earlier that the Equality Act looks at two characteristics, sex and gender reassignment. But the Supreme Court ruling, which is only an interpretation of the law, and there are many who say that it's not, does not say that, as you mentioned earlier, and if I might disagree with you, it does not say that transgender women are men. It still absolutely protects transgender women as women, but then when it was talking about sex as a protected characteristic, it said for the sex one we are talking about biology, but it didn't erase the gender reassignment as a protected characteristic, which means it's real.
It hasn't erased gender reassignment surgery, but for the purposes,
not surgery, gender reassignment.
But for the purposes of people who are providing.
Why she's doing this to herself. I'm sure to plenty of like trans people out there, just the fact that she's arguing at all with people like Helen Joyce is like she's sticking up for our rights. She's like some kind of hero. It's like manipulative to me. Like, I don't buy it at all. I disagree with all her points anyway. But even if I didn't, I would like to hope that I am like savvy enough that there's obvious like manipulation, there's obvious like, you know, there's motivation that's really about money, that's really about getting people into her clinic. Wouldn't be like clear to me, you know? Like, but to plenty of people, they just see someone sticking up for their side and don't think any more of it. It's the same reason as to why you'll get people, because they have some ideological interest in like showing the BBC's biased, they'll believe all that like weird shit that fucking that Sue Evans person has been pushing about how the BBC is biased because they didn't let her get the last word in like one debate, and like ignoring the fact that they were like platformed extensively in like some of the Newsnight stuff back in the day. Like it's a lot. I think I'm more and more convinced that plenty of people just go based on vibes, and she's just banking on the trans people that go by vibes being impressed by her just for saying the right things. Well, the more people that get out of that way of thinking, the better.
Providing services and single spaces, sex is biological. That was very clear.
That.
Well, that was very clear. Well, we can debate that.
I will just say Sex Matters intervened on the winning side in the Supreme Court judgment, and we were thanked for our submissions. What you've just heard from Helen Webberley is completely wrong. Our submissions were accepted, and of course what the Supreme Court says is the law. This is ridiculous to say they aren't the law.
We're going to get on to the treatment of children in a moment, but first let's talk about adults. Helen Joyce, if an adult has thought long and...
Helen Webberley used to counsel abused women. Fuck me, dude. I shouldn't be surprised. I don't think Webberley is convinced of her own stated position. Indeed, it's marketing. Listen, I can't read her mind. I don't know for sure. But I think that either she's convinced herself from the years of like doing this kind of work, or she doesn't really believe any of this, but it's a way of getting more money. It's very hard to tell. Very hard to tell.
And hard about it, and they want to take hormones, and they might even want to have surgery. What should...
Like, if I'm to go with my instinct, just looking in this person's eyes, no, I don't think this person believes any of this. I think this person is just playing a game, and it is just for the kind of clout and respect and the money that she's potentially going to get from this kind of thing. And that's what it looks like to me. Well, they're expanding to America. They're going to want all these like American fucking troons that don't think for themselves really and just accept all the fucking doctrine and don't question any of it. Those kinds of people are going to be impressed by this kind of shit because it's just pushback. But what's she actually saying that's making any fucking sense?
We as a society be offering them?
I think you've got to treat it like extreme cosmetic surgery, which isn't banned, but, you know, it's not something that changes your status in law. It's not something that's funded publicly, and it's really buyer beware. There's not many doctors want to do those sorts of things. You know, we heard some total misinformation on the subject of the Equality Act and the Supreme Court before the break, but the fact is that what the Supreme Court said is that people who go through these sorts of surgeries will not change their status in terms of single-sex spaces or services or sports or any of those things. They will stay being the sex they are. If they still want that surgery, yes, then that's their business. But they can't then say that they can use the opposite sex spaces.
But my question is, what should we be offering them as a society?
I mean, forbearance, no legal...
Well, you shouldn't mistreat people. just because they look different. I think that'd be a good start. I think males and females should understand that if things are single sex, that means that some people of your sex are not going to look like they are of your sex. And you should be accepting of the fact that males and females come in all shapes and sizes, you know?
Legal status change. I mean...
But what about services? And what about more people perhaps offering the sorts of services that Helen Webberley is offering?
Well, I'd like to see it treated like any other form of medicine, that people show us, decent studies that show that this improves quality of life, because none have.
Right. I mean, Helen Webberley, should it be on demand for adults? Should people have any mental health assessment before taking any treatment, drugs, or having surgery?
I mean, I think the person that's missing in this question is the person who's asking for that medical intervention. And I've been a doctor for 33 years, and in the whole of that time, I've never known a medical condition or a medical treatment being debated by mathematicians and statisticians saying it shouldn't be available, or classifying it as.
Do you think
as
it should
extreme.
just be doctors like you?
Well, it's between the doctor and the patient. And that's what medicine is. A patient has a medical condition or a diagnosis, or is requesting a treatment, requesting a pathway, and they go and discuss that with their doctor. The fact that we've widened this out to non-medics to have an opinion on what a patient can have, I mean, I can't equate it with any other medical condition.
Hang on. Well, how many medical conditions have come with the caveat that society has to affirm them as something? Society has to treat them as something that, to plenty of those people of that society, those people are not that thing that they now have to affirm them as. How many medical conditions come with the caveat that you have to think a certain way of them or you're a bigot? That if you have certain opinions about them, you cannot express them or you're a bigot and you might lose your job, or all kinds of other shit. At that point, it is everyone's fucking business. And yes, some mathematicians and other kinds of people are going to start coming along with opinions. That's their right. They might be right about some stuff. Half the benefit of a diverse society with lots of people that are good at lots of different things, still being able to talk about other stuff if they want, is that some of those people are going to come up with things that the so-called experts haven't thought of. And that makes their inputs potentially valuable. But she just wants to gatekeep the conversation. It doesn't work. You can't make it society's problem and then gatekeep the conversation.
That's ridiculous. We do this all the time. Epidemiologists and statisticians talk all the time about medicine. I worked for the Royal Statistical Society for many years. My PhD is in mathematics. My second subject was statistics. I literally edited the magazine of the Royal Statistical Society. I interviewed the statisticians who, after the Second World War, worked out how randomised control trials worked. We absolutely do not just say, this is what you want.
Isn't more than anything, like mathematics is kind of the language of everything. Having someone who knows what they're doing with like maths is probably handy for basically any area, like ever.
We actually work out what works in medicine. And by the way, the rest of us pay for this through the NHS. So the idea that this is just the patient comes in and says what they want and the doctor gives it to them, the rest of us just go along with that. That's completely absurd and absolutely not how it works.
I mean, I, with respect, I don't know whether you hold a statistics role in medicine at the moment, but there are many different types of statistics. But also, I mean, we have to understand that medicine and the NHS has a constitution. It has a list of things it will fund. There have been people in the past who say, for example, if you have lung cancer because you smoked, why should you sap our costs? If you ride a motorbike and you were reckless, why should we treat you? So we don't do that in medicine. And if there is a case for gender affirming care, which the NHS...
Well, now and then we do. Like we read recently, I can't remember if it was another Webberley conversation it came up. We read about this trans woman who like owns some like castle in Scotland or something. Samantha Kane, that's the one. They got like some surgery done in Serbia that went wrong. And then they tried to sue the NHS because the NHS wouldn't give them like corrective surgery. When surely the port of call is supposed to be to go back to the original surgeon. Like this is the kind of stuff that causes extra strain on the NHS. So that kind of thing can be the case.
has decided that there is, and of course also there are private options. The NHS isn't the only option. Then it's between the doctor and the patient to decide what's appropriate.
Although you would agree broadly that society can discuss these things, particularly if there are ethical questions.
They can have their discussions, but I think when we're missing the patient in the room, and the trans community are certainly not saying, please can you ban gender affirming care. The trans community just want to live their life. They just want to get on and be happy and not have society and politics coming in saying, we don't think you should have that.
Well, we'll come on to society and politics maybe a little later on, but let's talk about children, because the Tavistock Clinic, the only clinic that was offering the gender identity development service, was closed down because of concerns raised by the paediatrician Dr. Hilary Cass in her review last year. She said gender medicine had been operating on shaky foundations and that the evidence for puberty blockers was remarkably weak. Helen Webberley, until recently, this country was broadly following that path that the Tavistock was offering. Do you admit and accept that you've lost the argument? It's been shut down. It was the only...
Oh, they'll never have lost the argument on this. And they have a kind of easy out. I don't think I like this question very much. There's a very easy out, which is why we're still doing like clinical trials, which at least are very like restricted compared to how many kids would be going on puberty blockers if it was just widely available. But they always have the out of, well, you know, if we're saying there's not good research, then don't we need more research? Don't we need like better quality studies and stuff?
Service. There are some regional hubs, but people have...
More than anything, though, for most people debating, the only rule of debating is just never concede to anything and never admit that anything is like... Never admit defeat in anything, which... Personally, to me, that turns me off. I find that uncompelling. But it's an attitude that a lot of people have towards these kind of things.
Decided, government who commissioned that review and Dr. Hilary Cass, that the evidence just isn't there.
I think the mistakes happened many years before the Cass review with the Tavistock Clinic. It was a single clinic.
Well, it was the only one.
Yes, but which is highly unusual in the United Kingdom. You'd have several clinics, even for highly specialised services. It was one clinic.
I mean, it's not highly unusual when in the past they had like tens of referrals a year, and then that like skyrocketed suddenly.
Operating its own protocols, and it was criticised way before the Cass review. It was criticised by the Care Quality Commission, but the criticism was the way that the clinic was operating. But I don't think that should now mean that we don't follow the internet.
Criticism was the way it was operating. One of the big things around the Tavistock Clinic was the Kira Bell case. That literally was about transitioning someone when they were young. And there was a whole thing about can kids consent, which they kind of made a decision that they can't, and then that was overturned. But like the puberty blockers thing kind of died on its arse anyway.
International standards and guidance for treating transgender children, which unfortunately, because we have society and politicians coming in, is what's happened.
Helen, Joyce.
So I think that probably Helen Webberley is talking about WPATH and its standards of care, which suggest very much the model that she uses, which is that...
Actually, I was talking about the Endocrine Society.
Right, but would you agree? I mean, you've praised WPATH many times, so can I talk
today?
about WPATH? No, I just mean generally.
Well, you said I was referring to WPATH. I was referring to the Endocrine Society.
Okay, but would you agree...
But explain what WPATH is.
So WPATH is the World Professional Association for Transgender.
I have a feeling Webberley does not want to talk about WPATH. I can't think why.
Health, and it's regarded as the organisation that promotes gender-affirming care. I think broadly speaking...
Yeah, their standards of care are used like around the world. Not every country now. They're certainly not super relevant to the UK, which is why I found it baffling that that report about the BBC complained that they didn't cover the WPATH files. I don't really see why they should have, to be honest. It doesn't matter. But yeah, like they pretty much tell a lot of countries how to do gender affirming care. And even with like the kids, like transitioning kids, they don't even do it by the Dutch protocol. Their methods, their whole thing is like far more rushing them through, getting it done as soon as possible. And they'll apparently transition kids that have like fucking DID and all kinds of crazy trauma and all kinds of crazy conditions where they probably shouldn't be transitioning them. At least not until they're in a kind of stable place with their identity.
It will be the organisation that will be promoting the model that Helen Webberley would...
Excuse me.
And the thing is, when you talk about other like when you talk about other medical associations that are supportive of like trans healthcare, especially like child trans healthcare, a lot of the time they do point to WPATH. A lot of the time they do cite WPATH. So it's kind of hard not to talk about them, even if they're not super relevant to the UK.
I'm talking about the Endocrine Society.
No, but can I ask, do you agree that the WPATH is a good example of the sort of care that you would... That's genuinely a question.
The WPATH have published peer-reviewed standards of care. The Endocrine Society...
Yeah, peer-reviewed, wow. You can change some words around in Mein Kampf and get that peer-reviewed, apparently. Who's peer-reviewing it? Is it other members of WPATH? Is it other people from other organisations that they know are going to be like supportive of what they're doing? Does it really mean that much that it's peer-reviewed?
Society have published and endorsed international clinical guidelines. There's a difference. But
International clinical guidelines from who? WPATH, right? Who else issues international guidelines?
Oh, I understand, but I'm asking you, do you think the WPATH is standards of care is the right way to practice for children?
It is the global, internationally recognised standards of care, peer-reviewed by
there we go.
over 210 gender specialists.
And what are those standards of care as you understand them,
As
Helen
I
Joyce?
understand them, it's very much led by what the child says. And so it's if the child says...
Originally, the WPATH's standards of care had like a minimum age limit for how young a kid should be like considered for like gender affirming care. That Rachel Levine, who was like a trans person that was high up in the military under Joe Biden, lobbied to get that bottom age removed. It's very strange.
Says that, the child has an identity and so on. You affirm that. You socially transition the child. You present them as the opposite sex or as non-binary, and then you consider blocking their puberty, and then you consider cross-sex hormones if that's what the child wants to fulfil their embodiment goals.
And that's what was going on at the Tavistock Clinic, Helen Webberley.
Yeah.
No, I think they were actually much more conservative than that. So WPATH is very, very much more lax than... They don't particularly suggest any...
I can buy that as well, yeah.
particular investigations beforehand.
And you think that's wrong, to follow the child, the lead of the child?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, have a child tell you what they need in terms of their medicine. So people that aren't doctors shouldn't have opinions and weigh in on like trans healthcare, but children should tell doctors how their healthcare should be provided. Right? Am I getting this right? Am I getting this right?
You don't.
Well, again, we have a non-medic interpreting.
Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? We have a non-medic. Well, it doesn't matter. Why is she wrong?
And saying no investigations. I'm like, well, which investigation do you want? Does Helen Joyce think that they should be doing? Which investigation? I'm just interested.
Right, but how young should you listen to a child who is saying, I would like to change my gender?
They're not changing their gender. They're saying that their gender is different to the one that everyone's calling them. And the time that you listen is the first time that they say it.
I wonder if she agrees with Diane Arensaf that includes like pre-verbal cues.
Because you have to understand...
And what age could that be?
Well,
in your experience?
In my experience, it's around about 4 or 5 that...
Fucking hell, bro. So around about 4 or 5, your kid comes to you saying that they think they're a girl, and you just start affirming it from then on. Man.
That children start having a sense of self, a sense of identity. Really? And they might, at that age, kind of start saying, you're calling me a boy, but actually I'm a girl.
How do you know that means that they're actually a girl, though? What if they're wrong? What if they have some kind of trauma? What if for some reason their sense of identity is a bit out of whack? Why would you just immediately start affirming that kind of thing? That's insane.
And you would listen to that at the age of 4 or 5?
Absolutely listen.
But listen to it and then take action.
But what action? Because this is what people think. People think, oh goodness, then we're going to give puberty blockers. That doesn't come till much...
No, it's more about like, would you then start affirming them, like changing their name? Getting them a whole new wardrobe? Just straight away? Oh, well, let's socially transition you. And then when you're ready for puberty blockers, we'll be all sorted.
Much later. But the concept of believing a child and helping them explore their feelings is really important.
Hold that point for a moment, because we're going to talk about the specifics of what you have just begun describing of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and how Gender GP, your firm, operates after the news with Graham Stothard.
Is there not an extent, like, if you're going to like socially transition your kid, then your kid's going to think this must be the right way because the adults are going along with it. The adults are treating me this way. I'm potentially getting like special attention for it, which is probably quite nice. It's just mad. It's just mad to me. I don't know why she keeps going on about having to be a doctor, because it's a way of like invalidating what Helen Joyce is saying. And then if someone comes along who is a doctor, she'll find some other way of invalidating what they're saying. It's a way of writing off what someone's saying without actually engaging in any of it.
Oh, or maybe not. We're going to come back to puberty blockers a little quicker than I thought. In terms of the child, let me just continue this thread. Listening to Helen Webberley saying you should always believe a child, I think you said, listen to a child, and at some point take action. What's wrong with that, Helen Joyce?
I think there's two ways to listen to a child. One is that the child says something like, I think, Mummy, I'm really a girl. I'm talking about a boy saying this, say. And you say, oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that? What do you think that girls can do? What is it that you want to do that you think you can't do as a boy? Because the thing is, you are actually a boy, and that's not going to change. It can't change. Children are very literal-minded. They don't mean this airy-fairy sex and gender are different. And it's very cruel to tell a child they can do something that is actually just not going to be possible. They believe it, and they may be...
I do agree with this. I think if you're kind of going to explore why it is they feel that way, and maybe just kind of, if they want to do certain things that might not be typical of their sex, you can still encourage that kind of shit. And you're not, like, transitioning them. You're not telling them there's something that they're not.
Act on it, and then later on it turns out not to have been true.
I mean, do you accept that children change their minds? These are shifting thoughts.
What is essential is two things. One, Helen Joyce in her response, again, completely denies the existence of gender reassignment or gender incongruence. And I think that's a very dangerous thing to let pass. On the other hand...
What does that even mean?
And I think it's really important that we listen to children and we understand and we help them explore. But this blanket, no.
She's not even necessarily disagreeing. You can help them explore whilst affirming that, well, they're still the sex they are, and that's not going to change, because that is the truth.
You cannot be a boy because you...
I think maybe if, like, Helen Joyce went into it a bit more, that maybe you should, like, encourage them in certain interests they have, that because they have that interest that's more common in a boy than a girl, then maybe that'll help them work through their feelings. Maybe she could have, like, expanded a bit more. But like, we're not even she wasn't even necessarily saying otherwise with this.
You are a girl. I've worked with so many children and families. It's crucially and excruciatingly painful for that child to hear their parents say, you can't do this, because the transgender people of today, the adults, have all been a child. They've all been through that process. And I've heard the ones that have said, my mum said no, 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 or my mum let me explore what gender identity was for me. And there's a huge difference in the outcome to that.
Why are you exploring gender identity? What is gender identity? What does it mean to explore gender identity? You're talking about pretty much trying on labels and stuff. Isn't like adults labeling all this shit for kids and not letting them just figure out what these things are irrespective of labels and like adult concepts? Isn't that the better idea?
Right, but exploring conversations is one thing, Helen Webberley. Yeah. Taking action, you said later on. That comes later on. What age? What's the earliest age you would give a child puberty blockers?
Oh, I wish they wouldn't ask this. What about like social transition? What about social transition? Overwhelmingly, if you socially transition a kid, they're more likely to take puberty blockers. And like, well, obviously the answer to this is going to be when they start puberty. Although, you have to be careful with that. If you start a boy on puberty blockers, according to Marcy Bowers, certainly, in Tanner stage 2, when like that stuff starts, potentially they'll never be able to orgasm again for the rest of their lives.
When puberty starts.
Which is?
Well,
the young...
So in boys, is she like okay with the potential that that's going to happen?
Youngest age would be?
I think probably around 9 is the earliest, but there will be children earlier. Because, of course, don't forget that puberty can start in a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. So we give a puberty blocker to a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Yeah, because they shouldn't be going through puberty at that age. That doesn't mean you should give it to them because they have gender feelings. Completely different concept. It's a completely different condition.
3-year-old and a 4-year-old, because but people don't seem to think that that's not a problem. They don't think that's a problem.
Yes, because it's dealing with something that shouldn't be happening.
But it's only when it's a transgender child that
This is idpol. This is nonsense. It's not because they're trans. It's because they're going through puberty at the normal age. And what you're treating is something very abstract and nothing to do with the age at which they're going through puberty. So to delay it, it's like, well, why are you doing that? This is like idpol. It's nonsense. It's got nothing to do with, oh, it's because it's a treatment for cis kids versus trans kids. You'd have to establish what it is that makes a child different. Well, it's their gender identity. That's just something they say. You can't show a kid's gender identity. If a child goes through puberty at 2, you know pretty fucking quickly, because they're developing in ways they shouldn't be. That's like a very objective thing that is happening that shouldn't be.
that it becomes a problem. We use puberty blockers across all ages, whenever puberty starts, when it's damaging or inappropriate for that child. But what do you understand?
But it's not damaging or inappropriate for anyone supposed trans child to go through their puberty. It's potentially damaging to stop them going through their puberty. It's only damaging because they might not pass as well.
Stand by informed consent, Helen Webberley.
Informed consent means that you have the informed bit means the information. Right. So the doctor has the medical information, the patient has the personal information. You share that information and you come to an agreement of consent. So informed consent.
But in what world people will be listening to this is a child have or possess the capability to have informed consent at the age of 8?
But we perform medical interventions on children of 8 all the time.
Yes, but with the child asking for it.
But asking what? So you're not allowed to ask. It's like have a broken arm, cancer treatment, diabetes, respiratory medicine. We're treating children all the time.
No, treating children is one thing. I'm talking about the issue of consent. Yeah. That you would take the word of an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old.
It's crucial to listen to these children because I've seen that.
Yeah, listen to them. Yeah, take their word for it. That's a different thing.
I've seen what happens when you don't, and it's really painful.
All right, well,
there's going to be some confirmation bias here. You've seen what happened when they don't. Yeah, in the kids that continue with this feeling. What about the ones that don't? What about the ones that desist? You don't hear from any of them. You only hear from the ones who see it as like a damaging thing. So of course you're going to assume that it's always a bad thing, but that's not the case.
We'll see what happens later on in terms of when you don't. What do you say in response to that?
There's no other treatment that we would give a totally healthy child that disrupts normal physiological development. Puberty is an absolutely crucial process. It's the process that turns children into adults. Delaying an catastrophically early puberty is not the same as interrupting normal puberty. Everything else that we do for children is because something isn't working. They've got a broken arm, they've got diabetes, they've got all these other things wrong that Helen Webberley said. This is different. This is taking a child's counterfactual claim. And listen, it's not me that's being mean, it's nature that's being mean here. It is not possible to turn boys into girls or vice versa. It literally isn't possible. So doing this sort of intervention on the basis that you can is just sheer wanton cruelty.
I mean, you were, Helen Webberley, found guilty of serious misconduct by the General Medical Council, later overturned. And this was over a child that was given puberty.
Yeah, listen, it was overturned. She'd be eligible to have a license to operate in the UK again, but doesn't have one. That doesn't mean that some bad shit didn't go down with like Gender GP. That doesn't mean that she didn't do a lot of shit that was wrong.
Blockers by you. You call it a pause in terms of the development to give a child time to think. This child
I haven't called it that. I haven't called it that, by the way, but you put those words into my mouth.
Well, no, but I have heard you in other interviews because I listened before I did this debate this evening, and that was the word.
Owned. Yeah, I don't like all her questions, but this has been okay so far.
that you've used, to give a child time to think. This child was apparently adamant that they didn't want children. How on earth can a child know?
The thing is, I don't think we should base the whole of the care of transgender adults, young children, adolescents, adults on one case. Yeah. So for sure, in the United Kingdom, we don't have adequate standards of care, which is actually what arose the Tavistock travesty, and it's a real problem.
Well, the problem is, like, how would you have stopped someone like Keira Bell from transitioning? Is this person going to say that they wouldn't have transitioned someone like Keira Bell? They're following the W-Path model, then yeah, they would have. Anyone that follows like the W-Path model would have.
So, but I don't think that one case in my GMC tribunal, which, as you say, was overturned,
yes.
So the High Court found that the GMC were wrong to find that serious misconduct.
But my question is, how can a child know?
I just need to you need to allow me to clear my name, because the serious misconduct that you stated from the GMC
I said it was
overruled. But
yes.
I don't think that we should base the whole of transgender care for young people on my tribunal. There's a whole wealth of evidence.
She's just doing that. She always starts getting sassy after a while. It's funny.
But my question, and just before I come back to you, Helen Joyce.
Why is this person getting talking time? Well, I mean, you have to imagine how many people are willing to take a pro-trans position and debate someone like Helen Joyce. So I think it's part that, and part that there's a real opportunity for this person because she's launching Gender GP in America and wants to drum up support. So she can farm this for like Twitter clips where she's saying all the fucking heroic shit that all the trans people on Twitter are going like, oh my God, you're like standing up for my rights, when she really is not. And like, I think that is pretty much what is in it for this person and why they're getting airtime. Like if Times Radio could find someone better than Helen Webberley, then they would. But then the other thing is, she kind of is put into a position of authority because she runs Gender GP, you know? It doesn't really matter what kind of freako kind of person she is. The fact that she runs Gender GP alone is going to put her in a position of authority. So this is the kind of person that they would bring on to be like pro-trans, you know?
My question is, how can a child know at a young age if they do or don't want children?
Well, Joe, what I reckon you should do really is get...
Listen, I don't avow like harassing this person, just to be clear.
The parents and the children in here, once you've met as many transgender children and families as I have, and also spoken to adults who once were a transgender child, then maybe you'll change your mind. But for me at the moment, I'm their spokesperson, and it is true. Transgender people, whatever Helen Joyce says, transgender people exist. There are people...
No one's saying otherwise.
...who were assigned a sex at birth which turns out not to be their gender identity.
Gender identity is meaningless.
They do exist, and some of those people wish to take medical intervention to switch their hormone profile.
And I'm talking about age and consent and due diligence.
Yeah, so we just bring it back to these like generalized points. 100% I think she did that particular speech so she could clip it for like Twitter.
But what do you say in response? Let me give you a scenario, Helen Joyce. You're a parent and you have a child that...
Yeah, she really gets off on being like a spokesperson. Like I said, I keep mentioning her Twitter. Like, you can look for yourself, but like, that is one of the things that she is in this for. This is like clips out the ass of her being like the fucking hero.
So mathematical, so binary, so basic. Transgender people, whatever Helen Joyce says, transgender people exist, and the trans community are certainly...
Yeah, it's all her as well. There's no actual like back and forth. It's just her saying all the heroic shit, you know what I mean?
You're not saying, please, can you ban gender-affirming care? The trans community just want to live their life. They just want to get on and be happy and not have society and politics coming in saying, we don't think you should have that. Exactly, you're grasping it. So biological sex is very different to gender.
Yeah, that makes it sound like she fucking owned in this debate, where she's just being a patronising prick.
Identity, absolutely, and one is not dictated by the other. It's a very dangerous thing to associate.
Yeah, make sure we don't accidentally get any clips of the other person in the debates.
Transgender women with predatory men. They have the right to go in whatever they look like. We can't be the looking police. We can't say, excuse me, you don't look female enough to...
That's what women do. That's what happened. If you look like a man, you shouldn't be in the women's. But yeah, it's 100%. This is the kind of shit. And look at this shit, man. You're a hero, Helen. Like, this is what she gets off on. these fucking losers calling her a hero. I mean, to be fair, it is Twitter. Jesus Christ, you did great. She did not do great. Did this fucking loser watch the debate? Did they watch the debate, or did they watch that fucking clip of them saying all the fucking trans fucking talking points? Thank you. Wow. Whoever this is cannot be debated away from their bigotry. Wow. Gender fascists can't grasp reality. Biological sex continuum. Okay, so what's here, for example? So someone who is most of the way towards C, bearing in mind C is female and B is male. Someone here is not intersex. Someone here, in fact, almost halfway, but slightly more towards female. What is this person? What does this person look like? If you had to take like Klinefelter syndrome, what does that look like? Do they have like a slightly female bias because they have an extra X chromosome? Even though that makes no sense because they're XY and it's the X that duplicates. Meaning how the fuck is a female gonna have the equivalent of that? What's the biological sex continuum? What's frequency? So that means there's almost as many people who are 100% female as there are people who are 99% male and 1% female. What makes them 1% male? Sorry, I may have fucked that up a bit. You know what I'm saying? This is really, really stupid. This is PragerU levels of like graphs. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's Twitter. It's going to be people on Twitter saying that this person's deranged. I hate Twitter, but in that sense, I guess I do agree with them.
Comes to you and says, I want to change my gender. For argument's sake.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as I know, even anecdotally, of a parent saying no. And that's the end of the story.
I'd say, let's talk about that. What do you mean by that? Let's say it's a boy, just so I'm not constantly having to switch. What would be different about your life if people thought you were a girl, or if you were a girl? Is it something that you want to do differently? Children have very concrete ideas about things. They think that only boys can do some things and only girls can do some things.
Yeah, I agree with this.
Or they've just all sorts of, ideas.
It is a bit crazy to support the idea that you're just going to be like, no, you're not that, and if you say that again, I'll beat you or some shit. But no one's really saying that. No one with any kind of brain is saying that's how you deal with like your young kid that comes to you thinking they're the other sex, There are ways of doing it that aren't like ultimate affirmations, immediate social like transition, and aren't like blank dismissal, you know what I mean? You don't really have to do either of those things. Like the best way is to get to the root of it and see what would make them happy.
You need to get to the bottom of. Talking therapy is the right approach here. Open-mindedness, but never misleading a child. And
okay, she said talking therapy. Let's see if we get the conversion therapy thing from Helen Webberley.
Never using physical interventions for what is clearly a complex psychological issue.
I mean, if someone takes gender-affirming drugs and treatment and later decides it was a mistake, do you consider that they've been harmed, Helen Webberley?
I will answer your question,
yeah.
Sure, but again, for us to ask a non-medic, someone who's not a counsellor...
Oh, for fuck's... Man, this is like so fucking ridiculous. It doesn't matter. This person is your debate opponent. You can't, you've mentioned that this person's not a medic about fucking 5 times. It's so pathetic. We get it. You are debating this person anyway. Just fucking engage with the fucking question.
Somebody who's not a psychologist, not trained in gender medicine.
How do you know she doesn't know people that are? Do you think Helen Joyce just comes with all of her fucking ideas in a vacuum? And as a non-medic, then she should be disregarded? She probably fucking knows doctors. Probably knows psychologists. This is so stupid, man. I don't know how she's getting away with this shit. How many times has it been? We get it. Wow, amazing.
What is the right thing to do with the child, and for that person to come back.
So why is a child that wants to transition an ultimate expert, but an adult who's a mathematician who happens to have read a bunch of stuff cannot be? It doesn't really make any sense.
Can say, oh, well, you just need to talk to them and find out what I mean. We should not be basing our medical decisions in this country on the views of non-experts, which is what we're
not even talking about medical decisions right now. We're talking about, say, a 5-year-old coming up to you and saying, I'm a girl when they're male. You're not talking about a medical decision at that point. You're talking about what do you do with that kid in that instance. And maybe it's not as simple as either immediately affirming them or telling them no blankly, and that's the end of it.
With your guest over
Well,
there.
before then you answer the question, you know one of the clearest
Oh, just make her answer the stupid fucking question, man. Just make her answer the question.
examples was the closing down of the Tavistock clinic. Another example was the chief psychiatrist in Finland who was pioneering hormone treatment for patients, but then over time discovered...
Yeah, wasn't this true of Sweden as well? They were kind of ahead of the curve on a lot of the trans kids stuff and then started finding problems, then started going back on it. Isn't it often these countries that kind of pioneer a lot of this stuff that are the first ones to start turning back on it?
As she has written in a lengthy piece, that actually the majority, I think 90%, she said, of the patients that were coming to her were young girls between the ages of 15 and 17 who were asking to change their gender. They were in the wrong body, but they also were suffering from a range of other conditions that spread from autism to anorexia and depression.
It's very true. We're kind of suggesting the ROGD thing. Like, maybe ROGD is not a very well-founded like theory, but there's definitely some reality to it. Even Marcy Bowers will talk about these like cases that she's getting of these like young girls showing up with no prior signs of gender dysphoria, and then they hit like 14 or whatever, and that's when it suddenly comes at once, you know? This is like well established as a phenomenon.
And she became very concerned and concluded that they were the main issues, and actually changing gender wasn't going to solve it.
Again, I think we need to be very careful that we're not going on one person's view.
All right, but that's two. That's Hillary.
Just avoiding the question. Well, that's one person's view. Well, actually answer for this, though.
Cass at the Tavistock and the Finnish psychiatrist.
That's two. But how come when I, 10 minutes ago, said that the WPATH has over 200 gender experts who've reviewed all of the medical literature and research?
Well, who has the most experts isn't the same as who is correct.
And their publication, The Standards of Care, were peer-reviewed. And how come we don't accept that? But it's easy for us to accept.
Because you don't just accept something because the experts say so. That should be blindingly obvious. Experts are wrong about stuff. There has to be like checks and balances.
The one case that you hear in the newspapers, or the one and there have been people at the Tavistock who said a similar thing, but we need to understand the view of multiple experts and not alarmist cases.
Right, that's what they are.
Completely failed to even engage with the question, and we still haven't answered whether she considers that anyone who detransitions has been harmed.
Alarmist cases, Helen. Joyce.
Hillary Cass did the biggest and best.
Like, we talk about alarmist cases, but these are like national health services in like the UK, Sweden, Finland, etc. Presumably there's a fair amount of experts in those as well. So maybe comparing how many experts are on each side is not what the main issue is here. Maybe it's kind of a pointless conversation, but then of course it's a pointless conversation because Helen Webberley wants to waste your time. Helen Webberley wants to waste time going around and around and around on shit that doesn't matter, because otherwise she'd have to actually answer for stuff.
Systematic evidence review. Riitta Kerttu Kaltiala in Finland has done entire population studies. They really don't show anything remotely like gender-affirming care being sensible. And if we're going to bring up WPATH, one of the chapters in WPATH Standards of Care 8 is entitled Eunuchs. And it says that people can have a eunuch gender identity and that it might be appropriate to intervene if a man...
No, maybe that's my gender identity. Maybe my gender identity is actually eunuch. Maybe I should take that on just for like contrarian points or something. I think that'd be funny.
Says he's a eunuch, for example, to remove his testicles or to give him drugs to make his testicles not work. And what we're hearing is that people have gender identities and that they're able to tell them from the age of 4 or 5. And what I'd like to know is, if a little boy, 4 or 5-year-old, say, says, "Mummy, I don't think I want my willy, I don't think I want my balls," might we say to them, "Oh, WPATH says that you might be a eunuch. There's a eunuch gender identity. It might actually be appropriate to cut off your testicles."
No, this is actually quite good. Listen, I appreciate this.
And your Willie. We're not sure yet. We might have to wait a bit and see. But, I don't see what's wrong with what I'm saying here within the paradigm that Helen Webberley is talking about, where people know who they are, they know who they are from 4 or 5.
Once again, we have a 6-year-old saying, "Mummy, Daddy, I don't want my penis and my testicles," and then rushing towards the surgery to have them removed. It's just, these...
No, they're just informing them that that's an option. She's not saying that means that you should take them to have their balls cut off at the age of 6.
These small cases are that we're citing as examples to throw the.
But they are legitimate
population.
cases.
No,
that's an entire chapter.
Excuse me. I've never ever met a 6-year-old child come to me and say, I'm a eunuch and I want my penis and
Completely missing the point, but okay.
testicles cut off. I have met thousands and thousands and thousands of transgender people who identify as a different gender and would like to have gender affirming care, and that care the medical intervention isn't needed until puberty. So we hear all these alarmist bottom of the thing cases because we're not talking to true physicians and medical professionals.
My point was
Gatekeeping.
It's really about WPATH being massively important and experts, over 200 medical experts, yada yada, and yet they bring out a standards of care that has an entire chapter about eunuch gender identity. That's why I don't pay any attention to WPATH and why I'd prefer to listen to Hilary Cass and to Rita Kautokaltiala in Finland.
We're going to be back in just a moment and we'll be talking...
Yeah, so these she never answered the thing about detransition. Oh my God, man. Please tell me they get back on this so she actually fucking answers that. Oh yeah, I'll answer your question after I go on yet another fucking rant about how Helen Joyce isn't a medical expert. Like, Jesus Christ. It's about, it's 100% about just obfuscating the conversation. That's all these people do.
About cross-sex hormones.
And then that whole thing that they went on instead of what she was asking Helen the first time. It was a waste of time. It's just your experts versus my experts. Who fucking cares? So which ones are right? You can't just say the biggest number of experts must be right. The whole point is maybe the bigger group of experts haven't seen something. And the smaller group have seen something that they haven't. And it might be worth this bigger group listening to the smaller group. So it's such a worthless fucking conversation. Am I a trans? Yes, I suppose I am.
I said we'd talk about cross-sex hormones and we'll describe, or hopefully to Helen's will describe exactly what they are. But the vast majority of people who are prescribed puberty blockers go on to take cross-sex hormones. And that is the hormone that will bring on the sexual characteristics of their chosen gender. And Helen Webberley, I'm right in saying that is irreversible once you are on cross-sex hormones.
Well, the gender-affirming hormones is the word that we use, but the day you start gender-affirming hormones...
Do you think she does this, because she's thinking of a thing to come back with? Do you think she does this, correcting language and stuff, as a way of, sort of buying time?
Doesn't mean that it's automatically irreversible from that minute onwards, because what gender-affirming hormones does in someone who is taking puberty blockers is it starts a second puberty, and that second puberty...
Does it start a second puberty? I guess there's a point to which you could say it's like going through a puberty. But isn't the point of puberty to become fertile? If you're a male and you take estrogen, I've taken estrogen, I didn't consider that I went through a second puberty. I got some of the effects that you'd get from female puberty, but it's not like my period started after a year or two, you know what I mean? It's not like if you give a female testosterone that their balls will drop, you know?
Puberty takes as long as the first puberty to fully develop, and along that trajectory then the irreversible
whether a person can go through the other sex's puberty is a whole other discussion, and not really a relevant one, to be honest.
Changes will occur, which is what the patient wants.
But along that, they're irreversible by the time you've been through a programme of it. Okay. Yeah. And again, what age could they be prescribed at?
Well, that varies, really, because puberty blockers are easy. They're the best time they're given is when puberty starts.
To get out of answering the question. Or she does that all the time. Very, very slippery, this person, for sure.
Because you want to block puberty. For gender-affirming hormones, because it is a second stage of treatment, it varies and it should be guided by individual choice.
Right. How do you regard them, Helen Joyce?
I mean, in this country, we've now banned puberty blockers, and rightly, because there's no evidence base for their use. They don't improve mental health, and there are increasing worries that they're very harmful. And we say that we don't give cross-sex hormones on the NHS until 16 and preferably 18.
Right, so if they're banned, puberty blockers at the moment, then...
Well, Helen Joyce says again, she's not a medic, so it's very difficult to...
How many... Oh my God. How many fucking times are you going to say this? Jesus fucking Christ, man. This person, there has to be some female equivalent of like short man syndrome or like small dick man syndrome that this person has. This is like the height of insecurity, to like constantly demean the other person by saying, well, you're not a medic, so you know, this, that, and the other. It's like, how many times has it been now? Like 6 times this person has brought this point up. It doesn't matter. That's your debate opponent, bro.
Fine, and you've made that point on many occasions. But are they...
There we go. There we fucking go. Sorry, I hit my mic. There we go. Jesus Christ.
If they are blocked, what do you say to your patients?
I think this host has done an okay job. Like, there's definitely been some issues, but it's finally kind of growing a spine and getting wise to Helen's bullshit, at least. Jesus Christ, man.
And you've made that point on many occasions. But are they, if they are blocked, what do you say to your patients? They can't get them now.
Sorry, so puberty blockers, there's a government ban on puberty blockers,
yes,
only in transgender children and only until the age...
Yeah, she'll block any form of pre-puberty or puberty. So presumably what Marcy Bowers was saying about all those kids that she transitioned, those boys specifically, who went on to never orgasm ever because they started it too early. Presumably Helen is fine to take on that risk. It's a shame no one kind of pressed that, really.
Age of, I forget now whether it's 16 or 18.
And you welcome that?
No, I don't. It's tragic. Absolutely tragic.
Right. Helen Joyce.
I mean, the evidence showed that they didn't do any of the things they were promised to do. Obviously, they block puberty, but they don't make the children function better mentally, and they're harmful.
Right. You obviously don't support...
I think, like, the counterpoint... So they do the kind of, oh, well, kids kill themselves if they're not given the puberty blockers. Which, I mean, there was a government review of that, and they found almost no evidence of this happening, as reported on the BBC, who are apparently super biased, just saying. But other than that, I think the way that these people tend to get out of there is, well, you know, they still have to, like, develop, like, into an adult or whatever shit. Which is a bit bizarre, because suddenly these kids have, like, these amazing, like, notions of permanence, which... you know, certainly aren't true when it's like, well, I'm a 12-year-old and I know for the rest of my life that I'll never want to have kids, which, you know, you really can't bank on.
Support that ban. Do you prescribe cross-sex hormones instead to young people?
She wants to get them at toddler age, so at 8 they're convinced about it. Yeah. She hasn't said in as many words, like, start socially transitioning a kid straight away at like 4 or whatever. But truthfully, if you do that, then overwhelmingly they will go on to puberty blockers. Like, that is borne out in data, for sure.
The options for young people who can't have puberty blockers, the ones that are banned, which are the GnRH analogues, is that they can take other medicines to suppress their...
Quick question. Is Helen Joyce a medic? I'm not sure. It hasn't been made clear. Does anyone know the answer? I think Helen Webberley might know the answer, but she's been very cagey about this for some reason. Don't know why. You'd think it would be advantageous for her to mention Helen's medic or non-medic status, like, repeately, you know.
Their natural hormone production, all the effects of their natural hormone.
So are you prescribing cross-sex hormones?
I don't prescribe any, but that's up because I don't practice as a doctor at the moment. I don't prescribe. But
Yep, and listen, NHS GPs are not supposed to take instruction from gender GP, from transgender healthcare, and healthcare, whatever they're called. Those two were specifically pointed out by NHS England as like dodgy, unregulated groups that are telling doctors, you should give this person cross-sex hormones. They're not supposed to take instruction from people like this.
But doctors in this country will use other medicines to suppress puberty or the effects of puberty.
Are your colleagues and...
For trans people, outside of clinical trials?
partners at Gender GP prescribing cross-sex hormones.
Cross-sex hormones, yeah.
Right, even though puberty blockers are banned and you would normally start on those and go on to cross-sex hormones.
I don't know if you understood my answer, but there are different ways. So basically the two necessary interventions for a transgender child or adolescent are to suppress the effects of or production of the natural hormone and replace it with the opposite hormone, if we like. And there are many different ways to do that and many different schedules to do that.
Right, but without puberty blockers being prescribed because they're banned, are colleagues of yours at Gender GP prescribing cross-sex hormones to under 16-year-olds?
Well, not because of.
But are they?
Not,
all right,
yes, they're.
There we go. Prescribing HRT to minors, how nice.
Doctors in this country and in Europe are prescribing
to under 16-year-olds
hormones to under 16-year-olds.
How young?
Well, I don't know how young. I don't know. But whenever it's medical.
Black belt barrister did a piece on this. Like, listen. I think I draw the line at black belt barrister. Like, Jesus Christ, that guy is a fucking grifter if there ever was one.
Indicated to do that. This isn't about age. Everyone uses the age thing as the alarmist thing. Oh my goodness, that's too young. But don't forget that puberty progresses, and if we don't intervene, what you end it up with is life-altering, irreversible effects of the other hormone. So it's like.
What's my opinion about transgender topics for kids? I don't generally support like teaching kids about trans. They should probably understand at a certain point in life that trans people exist and it is what it is. I think that's about it. For the most part, kids should figure themselves out on that kind of shit.
The same life-changing, irreversible effects of the hormone that we prescribe, if you don't do it, you end up with the life-altering, irreversible effects of the hormone from natural.
Well, natural puberty isn't life-altering. It's how your life was going to go anyway. You're altering the natural progression. So how are you going to say it's life-altering that you go through puberty? That's how your life was always going to go. So the only non-life-altering way is to never go through puberty. What happens there? You're like inducing some kind of crazy DSD condition on some person where they never actually develop properly.
Natural body.
Yeah, there's no such thing as wrong puberty, I don't think.
I mean, I don't know how many times I can say that people are either male or female and sex can't change. So if you give a male person female hormones, that doesn't mean that they go through.
What's she offended by now?
Person female hormones. That doesn't mean.
Yeah, we can't go back over this again. Meanwhile, you're not a doctor.
Doesn't mean that they go through female puberty. A male person can't go through female puberty. So the pathway that Helen Webberley is describing.
Listen, Helen Joyce is a bit of a broken clock on the two sexes thing, but she's not done this anywhere near as much as the you're not a medic thing. So fuck me, dude.
Describing is a pathway that leads to adult sterility. Your own sex organs will not develop. I mean,
this is also true. Like, especially if you start puberty blockers too early on boys, their genitalia doesn't develop, which means you can't do a penile inversion vaginoplasty because there's nothing there to use. It's like way too small. So you have to use other methods like taking part of the sigmoid colon and stuff. It's not ideal. Like, we're kind of encouraged to think that it's just blanket better to block puberty, and that's a better transition than to not block puberty. But that's not even actually true. There's a whole list of different complications if you're to block puberty than if you're not to. You know what I mean?
Was that answering your question? Because we seem to have gone back to the fact that gender identity doesn't exist, and now we're straight back on
I brought in the word sterility here. So this
but
is
are you saying there are no
us...
side effects, and that none of the patients that you have treated have ever suffered the sorts of side effects that Helen Joyce has just outlined?
I mean, I don't know how balanced this is becoming, but the side effects of gender-affirming hormones.
They're combining meds to get the same result in England. Okay, right, I get you.
are the effects that that person wants. So, for example, somebody who is given, and Helen calls it you can't have a female puberty. Well, okay, let's call it an estrogen puberty.
Right.
And the effects of the estrogen puberty are the effects that the person wants.
Well, you say that that's what they want. Kira Bell was
we're going to go
an
on to,
example.
Again, we're going to go on to a case of one, which is really difficult.
These are.
But we use a case like Kira Bell because it's famous, but there are other people that have gone through the same shit that Kira Bell did. Don't even listen to the question before like interrupting to object now.
Are a lot of cases.
But one thing I've noticed, Helen Joyce kind of stays silent until she's like supposed to speak. This person interrupts an awful lot, like raises all kinds of ridiculous objections. It's not good. If this is your representative, if you're trans and this is someone you think should be representing you, you're fucking welcome to it. I think this is fucking gross. This person is disgusting.
Cases, though, aren't they? I mean, I've pulled out a few
Could we talk about the 262,000 people?
Yeah, Kira Bell is an example, but you can't bring up an example because they're like, oh, you're cherry picking this like one case. Like, at least let her do the question. Like, this person needs to tell her to shut the fuck up. Saying children want sterility, potentially, yeah. We don't really get any like, I don't know if she'll ever answer to the idea that children should be deciding to become sterile at a young age. Because like there are going to be people that will make that decision and then grow up, detransition, want to have their own kids. And then they can't, you know? It's just going to happen.
Which is really difficult.
These are a lot of cases, though, aren't they? I mean, I've pulled out a few
Could we talk about the 262,000 people in this country? Or
telling her what to talk about. This is your show. Oh my God, grow some balls. Tell this person to shut the fuck up. This is the question. It's our show. Shut the fuck up and answer why I ask. Jesus Christ.
Do we just want to talk about one Kira Bell?
That sounds like you're dismissing it. But Kira Bell went to court.
Of course she's dismissing it. Because she didn't want to talk about this. Because it's not advantageous.
Puberty blockers that I received at 16 were designed to stop my sexual maturation. The idea was that this would give me a pause to think about whether I wanted to continue to a further gender transition. This so-called pause put me into what felt like menopause with hot flushes, night sweats and brain fog. All this made it more difficult to think clearly about what I should do. By the end of a year of this treatment, when I was presented with the option of moving on to testosterone, I jumped at it. I wanted to...
It's a bit insidious in a way. So if you take the puberty blocker and it makes you feel like shit, potentially it like messes with your brain development and you feel like you can't think clearly. And then the testosterone is like, well, you can go on to this and this will help you like further development. You'll like grow to become an adult in the sex you want to be or the gender you want to be, not the sex that you are. They might jump at it just because of how shit the like puberty bloggers make them feel. It's a bit insidious. Like, listen, it might be isolated to this one case. I don't know too much about like most people's like experience on puberty blockers.
To feel like a young man, not...
Any drugs that do the same as whatever it's called puberty blockers is also illegal. Yeah. As far as I know, that's the case. It's like, what is it? GnRH agonists or something like that? Like they'd be using puberty blocker to mean anything that blocks puberty, I would have thought.
An old woman. I was eager for the shots to start and the changes...
I'm very, very loath to agree with Black Belt Barrister on anything. I actually fucking despise him, but I think he probably is correct there.
...would bring. But it's very clear that they weren't thinking clearly. Does it give you pause for thought, Helen Webberley?
Well, you see, Kira Bell went through the Tavistock. The Tavistock didn't... And what the Tavistock said was, regardless of your age, you must have puberty blockers for a year before gender-affirming hormones.
And that was wrong.
And that's what Kira Bell had. So Kira Bell did have an estrogen menopause and then had to endure that for a year and then had testosterone.
What she's saying, she should have had a puberty blocked sooner and that would have resolved it.
But that's not what. If you have a look at the Endocrine Society guidelines and WPATH standards of care, that's not the clinical guidance that they would have done.
Did it give you pause for thought, that case?
And that is what was...
Wait, so if a kid comes to you and they've already started puberty, would you still give them puberty blockers? Because that presumably then would end up playing out a similar way to how it felt for Kira Bell, no?
Was criticised by the CAS review and the Care Quality Commission because they weren't following standards.
Does that reassure you?
I mean, if I can give it...
They weren't following standards. I mean, the Endocrine Society maybe. Like, I don't see how any country is like beholden to WPATH for sure. Wait, the Endocrine Society. Is this an American thing? Well, why would they be beholden necessarily to the Endocrine Society either?
The big number, 96% of female people who take testosterone for gender-affirming care will get pelvic floor dysfunction. I'd very much like to know if that is what is said to them, because it's very bad for female sex organs.
Where does that stat come from? Can we have that clearly?
That comes from a paper.
Jesus Christ, ask her a question, then let her answer. Jesus fucking Christ, man.
With female sex
Where
organs.
does that stat come from? Can we have that clearly?
That comes from a paper.
Trying to answer, she's still like adding on to the question she just asked.
By a physiotherapist who has looked into it because she treats a lot of them.
Like the fucking Katie Montgomery school of debate. Ask a question and then just carry on talking.
I can provide you with the source afterwards, since clearly you need to know it. But obviously it is not good for female sex organs to have testosterone.
But again, you know...
Do you talk to your patients about that? That sort of thing?
Well,
yeah, that's a good question.
Of course we discuss all of those things.
Right.
Wait. The thing you just disbelieved, you talk about? I mean, I guess what she means is like they warn of the risks, which obviously I have no idea what this fucking disgusting organization does. When I transitioned on the NHS, they did like tell me what the risks of each and everything was. I think it probably doesn't matter, because if you're dead set on transitioning, you're just going to hear whatever they say and just be like, okay, well, I'm doing it either way. Endocrine Society and WPATH are two sides of the same coin, both enjoy citing each other's studies and papers constantly. Yeah, that sounds about right. Do I support Israel? Depends in what sense.
But pelvic floor dysfunction...
To a 12-year-old, would they know?
Do I think Israel should have the right to exist? Yeah, I guess. Do I think they should be blowing up Gaza? Probably not.
Know necessarily what that means and what effect that might have later in life?
Well, you're back to the gender-affirming care in 12-year-olds. So the 12-year-old is on puberty blockers. I've never heard this statistic that's come forward. How many patients were in this study? Do you know?
I asked a friend who did the study, so I'd have to come back to you.
Okay.
Elaine Miller, she's an extremely well-known physiologist.
You might find a study that's got 8 people. I don't know. I've not seen this study, and you might say, "Oh goodness, 94%." So maybe 7 of them had pelvic floor dysfunction. But what you have to understand is that if medic.
What's she suggesting?
Study that's got 8 people. I don't know. I've not seen.
Yeah, so you don't know. So why are you speculating this? New research in the International Urogynecology Journal raises serious concerns about testosterone use among trans-identified female patients. Researchers found that 94% of the patients they studied had developed pelvic floor dysfunction since starting testosterone. So 68. It is a small sample size, don't get me wrong. So let's say, what, about 65? Maybe 65 or 66 out of these 68 transgender men had pelvic floor dysfunction. I mean, it's not great, is it? It's not, listen, you have to bear in mind the small sample size, all that kind of stuff. There's going to be potential factors. I don't like looking at this and just being like, yep, that's the number, that's how it is. Everyone stop transitioning immediately. I think that's a bit ridiculous, but it's not great, is it?
Seen this study, and you might say,
have I watched Webberley and Julie Bindel? No. I might watch it. I've been told that apparently it doesn't really go anywhere and only gets interesting towards the end, but I'll see.
Oh goodness, 94%, so maybe 7.
The thing is, I am very, very sick of the sight of this person. This is the 3rd time I've watched them in a fairly quick succession, because they're on this PR tour, being the savior of trans people, whilst promoting their shitty business, promoting a business that takes money out of trans people's hands. So yeah, I don't know.
7 of them had pelvic floor dysfunction. But what you have to understand is that if medics go on proper research and guidance...
Yeah, so that was not proper research, and what she thinks is proper research is proper research. So what are you even saying?
And standards that are peer-reviewed. Not one single paper that you can find, which may have a very tiny number of cases, that shows what the other side wants.
But we don't know if it's one paper. There might be other papers that show similar things. Or this might just not be something that's really been examined by what you're calling the proper research. Again, it's part of the appeal to authority. Well, you're not a medic, so you don't know what the proper research is. I know what the proper research is, and that's anything I want it to be.
I know. Oh yes, go on.
The CAS review is
It was hell when I temporarily lost all my hormones due to a vein being compressed in my stomach. Can only imagine what it must be like for trans men to mess with hormones like that. Oh, fair enough. I'm guessing you're female, by the way.
The systematic review here, and it just doesn't show that this pathway has evidence behind it.
Can I bring up another case? I know you think I'm picking cases, but I'm trying to give a sense of
avoidance and smarmy patronise. Yeah, that's all she does. That's all she does. Extremely slippery, extremely condescending. Like, watching Helen Webberley is like maddening a lot of the time.
Cases that have come to light that have gone through the courts. Can I just do it and then you can...
Oh my God, let her get a fucking sentence out. The crazy thing is, I swear to God, she spent more time arguing with the fucking host than debating with Helen Joyce. How much time has Helen Joyce just been sat there whilst these two are fucking arguing? Because this person can't let her finish a fucking question. Like, oh, so controlling. I hate to think what she's like with her husband.
Let me bring up another case. I know you think I'm picking cases, but I'm trying to give a sense of cases that have come to light that have gone through the courts. Can I just do it and then you can say?
It doesn't even start. It's harmful. What's harmful?
To the rest of the population, when you use...
It's not harmful to me, and I'm trans. You're not. Shut the fuck up.
Or is it highlighting it? I mean, you're a champion of this and you've been able to defend yourself. Let me give you this case.
Do I see why you're a Helen Joyce fanboy? Well, I kind of assume it's because you agree with her.
Let's look at the case that was examined in the family court in the UK.
I think she's done quite well in this, to be honest. There are things that I like about Helen Joyce. There are things that I am quite suspicious of about Helen Joyce. She's done decently in this, I would say.
Gender GP prescribed testosterone to a child known...
Honestly, I feel like she hasn't actually talked all that much in this.
...as Jay, who had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder.
Oh, they tried to bring this up to Webberley in the GB News thing. And all she really said is, oh, this case wasn't in England, it was in Australia or something, which I'm not even sure is true. But again, it's just a way of not actually engaging with this case.
Disorder and had a history of anorexia. In fact, had spent 9 months in hospital under the Mental Health Act because of malnutrition. Jay came to you aged 14.
Which case is this? The one she's literally like fucking describing? Try listening.
Which case
and
was this,
with
please?
3, it just comes under J.
No, which court was this and which country was this? Because that's
in
not
family court. Family court.
Why does it matter whether it's in the UK?
In the UK, it was the family division here.
Oh, yeah. She tried to pretend this was in Australia. When you look it up, it was in like a court in London. I guess it's not out of the question. It was regarding someone in Australia because she's like, was maybe in the UK at the time. But like, fucking hell. She'll do anything to not engage.
Here. I'll just finish. Jay came to you age 14 and within 3 months was prescribed testosterone.
$30 a month to 12,000 clients. Yeah. She makes bank off this shit. 100%. Webberley is like monetarily like motivated with this. It's very possible she didn't actually believe anything she's saying, and it's all obfuscation.
And I suppose the question is, did you order any blood tests or bone x-rays before prescribing gender-affirming hormones to Jay?
I don't know this case, and it's not my my patient. I don't know the ins and outs.
It was Gender GP. You're ultimately responsible. You own the fucking... You're like at the top. It's your shit. The buck stops with the fucking owner, does it not?
For this case.
Would you have...
You own a restaurant and one of your chefs gives someone food poisoning. As the owner, you still have to like take some responsibility there.
Done. If someone had come presented to you with those issues, those conditions, autism spectrum disorder and a history of anorexia, would you have ordered blood tests or bone?
Yeah, in Iran, don't they transition like males that are gay so that they're not gay anymore?
X-rays.
I'm interested. What do you think the blood test would have shown with the autism and anorexia and gender dysphoria? Because they don't show up on a blood test and they don't show up on a baby.
Yes, I transitioned someone with autism and anorexia. And what?
brain scan. And this again is when we've got people.
Well, an independent expert looked at Jay's medical notes and said that Jay was at an independent expert was at risk of sudden death.
Yeah, but if we're going to do this,
it sounds like you are trying to split hairs, Helen Webberley, instead of saying
she is. Jesus Christ! Again, like at least she's like growing some balls here.
Death.
Yeah, but if we're going to do this,
it sounds like you are trying to split hairs, Helen Webberley, instead of saying yes, we would have done all the due diligence that was necessary.
The due diligence is...
Yes, because she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. Probably doesn't remember this case. Might have been a doctor under her watch, but she wasn't really watching because she didn't give a shit.
Dictated by WPATH and Endocrine Society. You can talk about splitting hairs with one patient who might have had autism and anorexia, but
one patient who might have had autism, when it's like almost like 50% of these kids that transition that probably have autism.
By using that one case to dictate or let all of your listeners decide whether gender-affirming care and gender gender-affirming care...
What is this? Using one case to decide, like she's presenting like examples to you and you're like, you're expanding it, you know what I mean?
Is the right thing to do and gender incongruence exists. It's really unhelpful to use one case when there are hundreds and millions of transgender people across the world.
The family court says that child was put on testosterone at such a high level.
Hey, Helen Joyce is still here. Remember Helen Joyce?
Of transgender people across the world.
Okay, listen, Muslims are welcome here. We don't discriminate based on faith.
The family court says that child was put on testosterone at such a high level that they are at risk of sudden death.
Can I just wrap this up, because we haven't got much time left, by asking a question to both of you, but starting with you, Helen Joyce. If we go back to the beginning and we look at the interpretation from the Supreme Court ruling, you used the word we've won, or we've won that case. Do you think it is time to be generous to the transgender community, to be a bit more benevolent, perhaps, to the sort of work that Helen Webberley is doing or not?
I think...
To the trans community, maybe. To the work Helen Webberley is doing, fuck no. Get that fucking person as far away from trans people as possible.
The work that Helen Webberley is doing is absolutely malevolent. I think she's...
Based.
She's doing enormous harm to children.
Also based.
I
take a line at disagreeing with that on it.
Is it your turn to talk, Webberley?
I think that the kindest thing to do to people who identify as trans is absolutely not to give them evidence-free, harmful medicine, and I think that's what she's doing, and this type of care is not going to last. It is going to be looked back on with horror. Do you agree with that? Do you think it will be looked back in horror?
I think absolutely not. I think this present time in history is going to look back in horror when there are thousands and thousands of transgender people not accepted, hurting, being harmed by these kind of views.
Yeah, death before detransition is a bit more literal in Iran, for sure.
Thank you to both of you. That's all we have time for.
Thank you.
Wow. Listen, this was way better than the GB News thing, for sure. I think Helen Joyce did a decent job. This host was okay, like, some of the questions were a bit dumb. She did let Helen Webberley, like, dominate her a little bit too much. But in general, I don't know. It was way, like, the GB News thing was terrible. It was weird because like Helen Joyce was like saying, oh yeah, that GB News guy did really well. It's like, no. No, he fucking made a twat out of himself. He shouldn't have been doing that interview or debate or whatever. And I'm gonna guess most of the comments are like anti-Webberley, because why wouldn't they be? Webberley probably wants to be hated by most of these people. She just wants the clout from trans people. And there are lots of trans people that will listen to this and just see Webberley as taking their side when it's not like that. The side Webberley is on is her fucking wallet, ultimately. That's what her side is. You would have to really drill at her to keep on point. Yeah, I agree. People have been debating this through independent media for years. I mean, I guess that's true. It's not often like so-called experts, however. When you're crazy enough, you don't get how you sound to everyone else. I don't think she cares what she sounds like to most people. I think she only cares what she sounds like to trans people on Twitter, because she can farm this shit on Twitter and Instagram and all this stuff, putting herself out as this fucking hero of trans people. And the more trans people that understand that this is a manipulative piece of shit who cares about her bottom line, the better. I don't really expect to get through to many trans people. Too many of us are, like, losing our shit, falling face first into a ridiculous fucking ideology, a fucking thought cult, where people like Helen Webberley are, like, fucking eating you alive.